The sound of my wife's laughter drifted through our marble-countered kitchen like broken glass. I stood frozen in the hallway, whiskey tumbler halfway to my lips, listening to Taryn's voice carry through the speaker of her laptop. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "You're completely helpless in bed, Griffin," she said to her girlfriends on the video call, not knowing I could hear every word. "The girls said I should just dump you already. I mean, what's the point of staying married to a man who can't even satisfy his own wife?" More laughter erupted from the screen. I recognized the voices: Renee Collins, her business partner, and two other women from their PR firm. My hand tightened around the glass as Taryn continued her performance. "Honestly, I'm thinking about it. Maybe I should start looking for someone who actually knows what they're doing. I guess I should start writing my own Yelp review," I thought bitterly. "Investment banker seeks bedroom performance coach. Previous experience apparently inadequate." Setting my drink on the hallway table, I walked into the kitchen. Taryn's back was to me, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light from her laptop screen. Our house, all glass walls and cold surfaces, suddenly felt like a fishbowl where I was the main attraction at feeding time. "Oh, Griffin's home," Taryn said, not bothering to lower her voice or close the laptop. "We were just talking about you, honey." The women on screen giggled. Renee waved at me with mock enthusiasm. "Hi, Griffin. We were just giving Taryn some advice about spicing things up." "How thoughtful," I said, my voice flat. "Don't let me interrupt your performance review." Taryn spun around in her chair, her green eyes flashing with irritation rather than embarrassment. "Don't be so sensitive. We're all friends here." "Right, friends." I picked up my whiskey and headed toward the stairs. "Next time, maybe send me a memo with your feedback. I'll see if I can implement some improvements." "Griffin, don't be ridiculous." "Good night, ladies," I called over my shoulder. "Enjoy your consultation." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my mind already spinning. 23 years of marriage, and this was what it had come to. Public humiliation disguised as girl talk. I'd built us a comfortable life. My job at Sterling Investment Group paid well enough for this house, her BMW, the country club membership she insisted we needed. But apparently, money couldn't buy satisfaction. Or discretion. The next evening, we had dinner plans with two other couples at the Riverside Country Club. Taryn had been unusually quiet all day, which should have been my first warning. She was never quiet unless she was planning something. We sat at our usual table overlooking the golf course. Mark and Jennifer Walsh were there, along with David and Susan Chen, all successful couples in their 40s, the kind of people who measured their worth in square footage and luxury car models. The conversation flowed easily around topics of vacation homes and private school options for the kids. Then Taryn struck. "You know," she said, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision, "Griffin and I were just discussing how important it is to keep things exciting in a marriage. Isn't that right, honey?" I looked up from my steak, sensing the trap, but not yet seeing its full shape. "Sure. I mean, after so many years together, it's easy to get comfortable. Maybe too comfortable." She took a sip of wine, her eyes never leaving my face. "Some people just stop trying, you know? They think just showing up is enough." Jennifer leaned forward with interest. "Oh, I know exactly what you mean. David and I were just talking about that, weren't we?" Susan nodded enthusiastically. "It's so important to keep working at it. Both people have to put in effort." "Exactly," Taryn said, warming to her theme. "I was telling the girls yesterday that Griffin here seems to think marriage is like a savings account. You make one deposit and expect it to earn interest forever." The table went quiet. Mark cleared his throat uncomfortably. David studied his wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. "But some of us," Taryn continued, her voice getting louder, "some of us need a little more performance. if you know what I mean. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Jennifer's face had turned pink. Susan was staring at her plate. Mark looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I set down my fork carefully and looked directly at my wife. Feel free to start looking for someone who meets your standards, Taryn. I'm sure there's a performance review website for that too. Griffin? No, really. I stood up, pulling my wallet from my jacket. Ladies, gentlemen, enjoy your dinner. Taryn, I'll be at home when you're ready to discuss this like adults instead of gossiping teenagers. I dropped $200 on the table and walked out, leaving my wife sitting there with her mouth open and 4 very uncomfortable friends. The drive home gave me time to think, which was dangerous. 23 years. A daughter in college. A life built together, brick by brick, compromise by compromise. And now this. Public humiliation served up with a side of salmon. When I got home, I poured another whiskey and sat in my study, staring at the framed photos on my desk. Our wedding day. Sammy's graduation from high school, family vacations where we all smiled at the camera and pretended everything was perfect. My phone buzzed with text messages. First from Mark. Dude, that was awkward as hell. You okay? Then Jennifer. Griffin, I'm so sorry. That was completely inappropriate. Even David, who barely spoke unless it was about golf, sent a message. Taryn was way out of line tonight. Call if you need to talk. But nothing from Taryn. I was halfway through my second whiskey when I heard her car in the driveway. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Her heels clicked across the marble foyer like gunshots. Griffin, she called. Griffin, we need to talk. I stayed in my chair, listening to her stomp around the house looking for me. When she finally found me in the study, her face was flushed with anger and whine. How dare you embarrass me like that, she said, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips. Walking out on dinner, leaving me there to explain your little tantrum. My tantrum? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Taryn, you just spent 20 minutes telling our friends that I'm inadequate in bed, in public, at the country club where we have to show our faces every week. I was just making conversation. You were humiliating me, again, just like you did yesterday with your girlfriends on that video call. Her face went pale. You were listening? Hard not to, when you're broadcasting my personal failings to half the town. I stood up, setting my glass on the desk. What's going on, Taryn? Really? Because this isn't about our private life. This is about something else. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. But then the mask slipped back into place. This is about you not paying attention to your wife, she said coldly. This is about you taking me for granted. This is about you thinking you can just coast through this marriage without putting in any effort. And the solution is to mock me in front of our friends? Maybe if you were actually listening, I wouldn't have to get your attention this way. I stared at her. This woman I'd shared my life with for over 2 decades and realized I was looking at a stranger. When had she become so cruel? When had I become her enemy instead of her partner? I'm going to bed, I said finally. We can talk about this tomorrow when you've sobered up. Don't you dare dismiss me like that. But I was already walking past her, heading for the stairs. Behind me, I heard her mutter something under her breath that sounded like pathetic. That night, I lay in our king-sized bed staring at the ceiling while Taryn slept beside me, her back turned like a wall between us. Something was wrong, more wrong than just a marriage gone stale. The cruelty in her voice, the calculated nature of her public attacks, the way she'd looked almost satisfied when our friends squirmed in discomfort. This wasn't random. This was planned. The next morning, I woke up to an empty house. Taryn had left early for work without saying goodbye. Not unusual lately. I made coffee and checked my phone, finding 3 missed calls from work and a text from my daughter Sammy. Dad, heard about last night. Mom's posting cryptic stuff on Instagram. What's going on? What indeed? I was about to head upstairs to shower when I noticed Taryn's tablet on the kitchen counter, still open and logged in. She must have forgotten it in her rush to leave. I almost walked past it, but something made me stop. The screen showed her text messages, and the most recent conversation made me freeze. "Last night went perfectly," she had written to someone named Elliot. "He's starting to crack. Give it another week and he'll be begging for a divorce." Elliot's response: "Can't wait to see his face when he finds out about us. You sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Griffin's clueless. Too busy playing the victim to notice what's right in front of him. Besides, after what I said at dinner, everyone thinks he's pathetic anyway. "You're evil. I love it. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place?" "The Riverside Motel, room 237. And Elliot? Bring that camera. I want to document his humiliation for the divorce proceedings." My hands were shaking as I scrolled up through their conversation. Months of messages, photos I didn't want to see, plans to destroy my reputation, my friendships, my life. All laid out in explicit detail. I took screenshots of everything, my lawyer's training kicking in even through the rage and betrayal. Evidence. I would need evidence. Then I set the tablet back exactly where I'd found it, open to the message thread. Let her find it. Let her wonder how much I knew. Hell hath no fury like a banker scorned, I thought grimly. The game was about to change. The name Elliot Voss wasn't familiar, so I did what any suspicious husband would do in the digital age. I looked him up. What I found made my stomach turn. Elliot was Taryn's new business associate at the PR firm, brought in 6 months ago as a strategic consultant. 45 years old, divorced twice, with the kind of manufactured charm that photographed well for LinkedIn profiles. His social media was full of expensive restaurants, luxury cars, and motivational quotes about taking what you deserve. I'd met him exactly once, at the firm's holiday party in December. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of aggressive handshake that was supposed to establish dominance. He'd made some comment about Taryn being wasted on the domestic life, and I'd written him off as another corporate peacock. Apparently, I should have paid more attention. Over the next few days, I watched my wife with new eyes. The late nights at the office suddenly made sense. The mysterious phone calls she took in another room, the way she'd started dressing differently, more expensive clothes, more makeup, like she was performing for an audience I wasn't part of. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I started gathering information. It's amazing what people will tell you when they think you're just making conversation. A casual lunch with Mark Walsh revealed that Elliot had quite the reputation around town. "Guy's a shark," Mark said over his sandwich. "Heard he went through his second wife's savings before the divorce was even final. You know the type. All charm until he gets what he wants." A phone call to my daughter provided more pieces of the puzzle. "Mom's been weird lately," Sammy said from her dorm room at State. "She keeps asking about your work schedule and whether you're happy. It's like she's gathering intel or something." Intel. My 18-year-old daughter had figured out what I'd missed for months. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. I'd told Taryn I was working late, then doubled back home to retrieve some files I'd forgotten. Her car was in the driveway, but the house was dark except for the light in our bedroom. I climbed the stairs quietly and found her on the phone, pacing by our window with her back to the door. "Doesn't suspect anything," she was saying. "He's too wrapped up in his own wounded pride to see what's happening. Honestly, Elliot, sometimes I think he wants me to leave him. It would be easier than admitting he's failed as a husband." I pressed myself against the wall, listening. The country club thing was perfect. Jennifer Walsh called me today to check in, which really means she wanted gossip. I played the frustrated wife angle perfectly. Poor Taryn, married to a man who doesn't appreciate her. My hands clenched into fists. By the time we're done with him, Griffin won't have a friend left in this town. And when I file for divorce, everyone will understand why. The cheating will just be the final nail in the coffin. Wait, what cheating? You sure those photos will look convincing? She continued. I need this to be airtight. Griffin's smart. If there are holes in the story, he'll find them. The photos. They were planning to frame me for infidelity, set me up, document it, and use it to destroy me in divorce court. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated destruction of my life, orchestrated by the woman I'd trusted for over 2 decades. Time to fight back. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. First to my lawyer, James Morrison, to discuss asset protection. Second to a private investigator I'd used for corporate cases. Third to my old boxing coach at Murphy's gym downtown. Griffin Hayes, Coach Murphy said when I walked into the gym that afternoon. Haven't seen you in months. You look like hell. Feel like it too. Got time for a session? Always got time for you, kid. Glove up. 20 minutes on the heavy bag helped clear my head. The rhythm of punch, punch, move, punch gave me space to think. Murphy watched me work, occasionally calling out corrections. Whatever's eating at you, he said finally, you're letting it make you sloppy. Anger's good fuel, but you gotta control the burn. What if someone's been playing you for a fool? I asked between combinations. What if everything you thought you knew was a lie? Then you stop playing their game and start playing your own. He held the bag steady as I threw a particularly vicious right hook. But you don't get mad, you get even, and you do it smart. I was toweling off when Elliot Voss walked into the gym. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. He was dressed in expensive workout gear that looked like it had never seen actual sweat, talking loudly on his phone about some deal he was closing. He spotted me and ended his call, walking over with that predatory smile I remembered from the holiday party. Griffin, what a surprise. Didn't know you worked out here. Been coming here for years, I said evenly. You? Just joined. Taryn mentioned this place had a good reputation. His eyes glittered with malicious amusement. She's been very, helpful with recommendations lately. The bastard was practically announcing his affair, confident that I was too weak or too stupid to do anything about it. I finished packing my gym bag, taking my time. That's nice, I said. Taryn's always been generous with her advice. She certainly has strong opinions about what men should and shouldn't do. He was enjoying himself now, probably imagining how he'd describe this encounter to my wife later. Very passionate about getting what she deserves. Passion's important in any relationship, I agreed, though I've found that what people think they deserve and what they actually get can be very different things. Something in my tone made him pause. For just a moment, his confident facade slipped. Well, he said, I should get to my workout. Maybe we'll run into each other again. I'm sure we will. I left him standing there, but not before making a point of walking past his BMW in the parking lot. The vanity plate read, Voss 1, subtle as a brick through a window. I made note of the license number and the small dent in the rear bumper. Details. Everything would come down to details. That evening, I was ready when Taryn came home. She was in a good mood, humming as she set her purse down and sorted through the mail. How was your day? I asked from the kitchen doorway. Busy. We're working on a crisis management campaign for a client whose husband turned out to be a serial cheater. Amazing how men think they can get away with anything. Amazing, I agreed. What's the strategy? Complete character assassination. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word he says. His wife will get everything in the divorce. She looked up at me with innocent eyes. It's really satisfying work, helping women who've been betrayed. I bet it is. Learn anything useful? Oh, the importance of documentation, building a narrative, making sure you have allies when the truth comes out. She smiled sweetly. Why do you ask? Just curious about your work. We don't talk about it much anymore. No, we don't talk about a lot of things anymore. Her expression shifted, becoming calculating. Speaking of which, I'm going out with the girls tonight. Don't wait up. Which girls? Renee and some clients. Networking dinner. She was already heading upstairs to change. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. After she left, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything. The text messages I'd screenshotted, the times she'd claimed to be working late, the credit card charges at restaurants and hotels I'd never been to. The pattern was clear once you knew where to look. My phone rang. James Morrison, my lawyer. Griffin, I've been thinking about our conversation today. If what you suspect is true, you need to be very careful about how you handle this. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still impact asset division and alimony. What do you recommend? Document everything, but don't tip your hand. If she's planning to frame you for cheating, we need to be ready with a counter-narrative. And Griffin, whatever you're thinking about doing for revenge, don't. The best revenge is walking away with your assets intact. I'll keep that in mind. But as I hung up the phone, I was already thinking about Murphy's advice. Don't get mad. Get even. Do it smart. The next few days passed in a strange sort of normalcy. Taryn went to work, came home late, and pretended everything was fine. I went to my office, managed my clients' portfolios, and pretended I didn't know my wife was planning to destroy my life. But underneath the surface, I was busy. The private investigator, a sharp woman named Lisa Chen, had already confirmed what I suspected. Photos of Taryn and Elliot entering and leaving the Riverside Motel, credit card receipts, phone records showing dozens of calls between them, often late at night. Your wife's not very good at hiding her tracks, Lisa said when she delivered her report. Either she's careless or she wants to be caught. What do you mean? Some of these meetings happened in very public places. The Riverside Motel isn't exactly discreet. It's right off the main highway. And look at these restaurant receipts. She's using the credit card you both have access to. It's like she's leaving a trail on purpose. That gave me pause. Was Taryn really that sloppy, or was this part of some larger plan? I got my answer the following weekend. Sammy came home from college for a visit, and we were having breakfast when she dropped the bomb. Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? I nearly choked on my coffee. What makes you ask that? She's been asking me weird questions about you, like whether I'd be okay living with her full time, whether I think you've been acting strange lately, and yesterday she asked if I'd ever seen you with other women. Taryn was building her case, using our own daughter as a witness. What did you tell her? The truth, that you're always working or at the gym, and the only women you talk to are Mom's friends. Sammy studied my face. Dad, what's really going on? And don't say nothing because I'm not stupid. I looked at my daughter, smart, perceptive, with her mother's green eyes, but thankfully not her mother's cruel streak, and made a decision. Your mother and I are having some problems, I said carefully, but whatever happens, it won't change how much I love you. Is she cheating on you? The question hit like a punch to the gut. What makes you think that? She's been different. Happier, but in a secretive way. And she's been really mean about you lately. Like she's trying to convince me you're the bad guy. Sammy reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I don't believe her, Dad. Whatever she's saying, I don't believe it. That afternoon, while Taryn was out shopping with Renee, I sat Sammy down for a longer conversation. I didn't tell her everything. She didn't need those details. But I explained that her mother was involved with someone else, and that they were planning to make me look like the villain in their divorce story. That's so messed up, Sammy said, tears in her eyes. Why would she do that to you? To us? I don't know, sweetheart. But I want you to be prepared. Things are going to get ugly, and your mother might ask you to choose sides. I already have. When Taryn came home that evening, loaded down with shopping bags and chattering about her day with Renee, I watched her performance with new eyes. The loving wife act, the casual questions about my schedule, the way she studied my face for signs that I suspected anything. She was good. I had to give her that. If I hadn't seen those text messages, I might have bought the whole thing. But I had seen them, and now it was time to start evening the score. That night, after Taryn fell asleep, I went downstairs and made one more phone call. Murphy's gym. Coach, it's Griffin. I need to ask you a favor. The plan started small, but like most good revenge, it grew in the telling. First, I began documenting everything with the precision that had made me successful in investment banking. Every lie Taryn told, every late night at the office, every credit card charge at hotels I'd never seen. I created spreadsheets, timelines, and cross-references that would have impressed my most detail-oriented clients. But documentation was just the foundation. The real work was more subtle. It started with social media. Taryn had always been careful about her online presence. Her Instagram was full of carefully curated photos of our perfect life. But social media was a double-edged sword, and I was about to show her the sharp side. I began liking and commenting on posts from women I worked with. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly professional interactions that could be screenshot and misinterpreted. I started checking in at restaurants and bars around town, always with vague captions like, "Great meeting tonight," or "Productive dinner." If Taryn wanted to build a narrative about my infidelity, I'd give her just enough rope to hang herself with. The beauty of it was that I wasn't actually doing anything wrong. Every check-in was legitimate. I really was having business dinners and client meetings. But taken out of context, viewed through the lens of a suspicious spouse, they could look like something else entirely. Within a week, I could see the effect. Taryn started asking more pointed questions about my schedule. She began checking my phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The paranoia that she'd been trying to cultivate in me was turning back on her. "You've been working a lot of late nights lately," she said one evening, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Year-end reviews are coming up. You know how it is." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Same as every year." "Right? Same as every year." But her voice carried a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. The second phase involved our mutual friends. This required more finesse. I started reaching out to people we'd socialized with for years, but I changed the dynamic. Instead of the couples' dinners and group events that had been our norm, I began suggesting one-on-one meetings, lunch with Mark Walsh to discuss investment opportunities, coffee with Jennifer to get advice about a gift for Taryn, drinks with David Chen to talk about a business referral. Again, nothing inappropriate, but patterns that could be misinterpreted by someone looking for evidence of an affair. The genius was that these meetings served multiple purposes. Not only did they provide the appearance of suspicious behavior, but they also gave me opportunities to plant seeds about Taryn's recent behavior. "She's been under a lot of stress at work," I told Jennifer over coffee, letting just a hint of concern creep into my voice. "This new guy they brought in, Elliot something, has been really demanding. She's been staying late almost every night working on his projects." "That's terrible," Jennifer said, taking the bait. "Is she okay? She seemed a little tense at dinner last week." "You noticed that too? I've been worried about her. She's been so angry lately, saying things that aren't like her at all. I'm starting to wonder if this job is changing her." It was masterful, really. I was expressing genuine concern about my wife's behavior while simultaneously establishing that her recent cruelty was out of character. When the truth about her affair came out, people would remember this conversation and think I'd been the caring husband trying to support his wife through a difficult time. The third phase was the most dangerous: direct confrontation with Elliot. I didn't plan it exactly, but when opportunity presented itself, I was ready. It happened at Murphy's gym on a Tuesday evening. Elliot had become a regular, though his workouts consisted mainly of posing in front of the mirrors and making loud phone calls about his various business deals. He'd nodded to me a few times since our first encounter, but we'd avoided direct conversation. Until he decided to get cocky. I was finishing up a session with Coach Murphy when Elliot approached, towel draped around his neck like some kind of athletic fashion accessory. Griffin, right? Taryn's husband? That's right. I continued packing my gear, not giving him my full attention. She talks about you a lot. Says you're really dedicated to your work. There was something in his tone that made Murphy look up sharply. The old coach had been around long enough to recognize the sound of a predator circling. Work's important, I said evenly. Oh, absolutely. Though sometimes I think people use work as an excuse to avoid dealing with problems at home. Elliot's smile was all teeth. Taryn mentioned you've been putting in a lot of late nights lately. Must be hard on the marriage. The gym went quiet. Even the guys lifting weights seemed to sense the tension. Funny, I said, straightening up to my full height. She hasn't mentioned you much at all. Really? That's surprising, considering how much time we spend together. Working, of course. He emphasized the word like it was a private joke. She's very passionate about her projects. Murphy stepped between us, his weathered face grim. Gentlemen, this is a gym, not a soap opera. You want to have a conversation? Take it outside. No need, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I was just leaving. But as I walked past Elliot, I stopped and spoke quietly, just loud enough for him to hear. You know what I've learned in 23 years of marriage? People who play games usually end up losing more than they bargained for. His confident smirk faltered slightly. See you around, Elliot. That night, I lay in bed listening to Taryn's breathing and planning my next move. The direct approach had felt good, but it was also risky. If Elliot told her about our conversation, she might realize I was onto them. But sometimes you had to take calculated risks. The opportunity for Phase 4 came sooner than expected. Renee Collins called me on Thursday afternoon, her voice dripping with false concern. Griffin, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly, but I'm worried about Taryn. Worried how? She's been so stressed lately with this new project at work, and she mentioned that you two have been having some difficulties. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to fill it. I was wondering if maybe we could grab coffee sometime, as friends. I might be able to give you some insight into what she's going through. Interesting. Renee was fishing, probably at Taryn's request. They wanted to know how much I suspected, and whether I was planning to fight back. That's very thoughtful of you, Renee. I'd appreciate that. We met the next day at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from our usual haunts to feel private. Renee had dressed carefully, professional but approachable, like a therapist or a very expensive consultant. I want you to know that Taryn loves you, she began, stirring her latte with theatrical precision. But she's been feeling very unappreciated lately. Unappreciated how? Well, you have to understand, Griffin, she's a successful woman with her own career and ambitions. Sometimes she feels like you see her as just a wife and mother, not as a person in her own right. It was a carefully crafted speech, probably rehearsed. I nodded thoughtfully, playing the confused husband trying to understand his wife's needs. I had no idea she felt that way. What do you think I should do? Maybe give her some space to explore who she is outside of your marriage. Let her spread her wings a little. You mean like a trial separation? Not necessarily that formal, but maybe don't be so possessive. Let her have her own life, her own friendships, her own experiences. There it was. Renee was essentially giving me permission to ignore my wife's affair, to be a compliant cuckold who looked the other way while Taryn played house with Elliot. That's interesting advice, I said slowly. Very modern. Exactly. Marriage doesn't have to be this restrictive, old-fashioned institution. People can love each other and still have freedom. And you think this would make Taryn happier? I know it would. Renee leaned forward conspiratorially. Between you and me, she's already started exploring some of these freedoms, and she seems much more relaxed lately. Exploring how? Oh, you know, new friendships, new experiences. That consultant they brought in, Elliot, has been very helpful in showing her different perspectives on life. I sat back in my chair, letting my expression shift from confusion to understanding to hurt. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I see," I said quietly. "Griffin, I hope you're not upset. This doesn't have to change anything between you and Taryn. Lots of couples have arrangements." Arrangements. I repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Modern marriages require modern solutions. The important thing is that you both get what you need. And what does Taryn need exactly? Excitement, passion, someone who appreciates her for who she really is. Renee reached across the table and patted my hand. "That doesn't mean she doesn't love you. It just means she needs more than one person can provide." I stared at her for a long moment, letting her think she'd successfully delivered her message. Then I smiled. "Thank you for being so honest with me, Renee. This conversation has been very enlightening. I'm glad. I was worried you might react badly. No, I think I understand the situation perfectly now." We finished our coffee with small talk, but I could see the satisfaction in Renee's eyes. She thought she'd neutralized the threat I might pose to their plans. She'd go back to Taryn and Elliot and report that Griffin Hayes was a broken man who would accept whatever scraps of marriage they chose to leave him. But as I walked back to my car, I was already planning how to use this conversation against them. Because Renee had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was recording this for posterity. My phone had been sitting on the table between us the entire time, seemingly forgotten but actually capturing every word of her pitch for my wife's affair. That evening, I transferred the audio file to my computer and began transcribing the key passages. Legal evidence was good, but social evidence was better, and I was about to show my wife and her co-conspirators just how dangerous it could be to underestimate a man with nothing left to lose. The game was accelerating, and I was no longer playing defense. It was time to start taking some scalps. The recording of my conversation with Renee was pure gold, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. Patience had never been my strong suit, but 23 years of marriage had taught me the value of timing. I didn't have to wait long for the perfect moment. It came in the form of the Riverside Country Club's annual charity auction, a black tie affair where the town's elite gathered to bid on vacation packages and feel good about themselves. Taryn had been looking forward to it for weeks, treating it like her personal fashion show. "I bought a new dress," she announced the week before the event, modeling a sleek black number that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. "Elliot said the firm should make a strong showing this year. Image is everything in PR." "Elliot's going?" I asked casually. "Of course. He's representing the firm's interests." She smoothed the dress over her hips, admiring herself in our bedroom mirror. "We'll probably sit together so we can coordinate our bidding strategy." How thoughtful of him. The night of the auction, I arrived separately, telling Taryn I had a client call that might run late. In reality, I wanted to observe the dynamics between her and Elliot without them being conscious of my presence. What I saw was even more blatant than I'd expected. They were seated at a prime table near the front, along with several other couples from the PR firm. But their body language screamed intimacy. The way Elliot's hand lingered on Taryn's back when he pulled out her chair, the way she leaned into him when he whispered in her ear, the shared looks and private smiles that excluded everyone else at the table. They weren't even trying to hide it. I took a seat several tables back, positioned so I could watch them while appearing to focus on the auction. The evening's entertainment was predictably boring. Overpriced wine packages and weekend getaways to places I could afford to visit anytime I wanted. But the real show was happening at table 6. Midway through the evening, during a brief intermission, I made my move. I approached their table with a smile, playing the role of the oblivious husband making small talk at a social function. "Taryn, you look beautiful tonight," I said, kissing her cheek. She stiffened slightly at the contact. "Griffin, I didn't see you come in." Client call ran long, as expected. I turned to Elliot with manufactured friendliness. "Elliot, good to see you again. How are you enjoying the evening?" "Very much," he said, his confidence fully restored since our gym encounter. "Your wife has excellent taste in charity events." "She has excellent taste in many things." I let my gaze linger on Taryn for just a moment too long. I'm a very lucky man. The other couples at the table murmured agreement, but I could see the discomfort in their faces. They'd picked up on the undercurrents, even if they didn't fully understand them. "Well," I said, checking my watch, "I should find my seat. Enjoy the rest of the evening." As I walked away, I heard Elliot make some comment that caused Taryn to laugh, a brittle, nervous sound that carried more tension than humor. Perfect. The auction resumed, and I watched as Taryn and Elliot engaged in what could only be described as competitive flirtation. They bid on items together, celebrating their wins with champagne toasts and intimate conversations that excluded the rest of their table. By the end of the evening, they'd successfully alienated most of their colleagues and provided me with enough ammunition to destroy both their professional and personal reputations. But I wasn't ready to fire that shot yet. The next phase of my plan required a different kind of precision. Over the following week, I began making subtle changes to our joint finances. Nothing dramatic. I wasn't trying to hide assets or leave Taryn destitute. But I started moving money around, consolidating accounts, and updating beneficiaries in ways that would protect my interests when the inevitable divorce proceedings began. I also started being more social. This was perhaps the cruelest part of my strategy, because it involved weaponizing the very friendships that Taryn had tried to poison against me. I reached out to couples we'd known for years, suggesting dinners and social gatherings. But instead of the usual group events, I focused on smaller, more intimate settings where conversation could flow freely and people could speak honestly about what they'd observed. The results were illuminating. "We've been worried about you," Jennifer Walsh said during a dinner at their house. "Taryn's been different lately." "Different how?" "Meaner," Mark said bluntly. "The way she talked to you at the country club a few weeks ago was completely out of line. Jennifer and I were embarrassed for both of you." "She's been under a lot of stress at work," I said, playing the loyal husband. "This new consultant they brought in has been very demanding." "Elliot Voss?" Jennifer's expression darkened. "I know his ex-wife, Patricia. The stories she could tell about that man." "What kind of stories?" "He's a predator," Mark said. "Goes after married women, convinces them their husbands don't appreciate them, then makes the final move. Patricia said he did the same thing to his first wife, turned her against her friends and family, isolated her, then cleaned her out in the divorce. I filed this information away for later use." "You don't think—" I began, then stopped, as if the thought was too painful to voice. "Griffin," Jennifer said gently, "we've been friends for 15 years. We know you, and we know Taryn. Whatever's happening in your marriage, it's not your fault." These conversations served multiple purposes. They reinforced my position as the innocent party, they provided valuable intelligence about Elliot's history, and they created a network of allies who would remember these discussions when the truth eventually came out. But perhaps most importantly, they got back to Taryn. The social circles in our town were small and interconnected. When Jennifer Walsh expressed concern about Taryn's behavior to Susan Chen, and Susan mentioned it to her tennis partner, and the tennis partner brought it up at her book club, the ripple effects were inevitable. Within days, Taryn was fielding awkward phone calls from friends who wanted to check in on our marriage. "People are talking," she said one evening, pacing around our kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. I could hear Renee's voice on the other end, high-pitched with concern. "Let them talk," Taryn continued. "Griffin's playing the victim, trying to make me look like the bad guy. It's pathetic." But I could see the worry in her eyes. Her carefully constructed narrative was starting to crack. The pressure intensified when Sammy came home for another weekend visit. My daughter had always been perceptive, but her recent conversations with her mother had sharpened her instincts to a razor's edge. She watched Taryn with the clinical detachment of a scientist studying a particularly interesting specimen. "Mom's been asking me about Dad's work schedule," she told me privately. "She wants to know if I think he's been acting suspicious lately." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That he's been the same as always, working hard, going to the gym, trying to hold this family together while she destroys it." "Sammy!" "Dad, I'm not stupid. I know what's happening here." Her green eyes flashed with anger. "She's cheating on you, isn't she? With that sleazy guy from her work?" I couldn't lie to her anymore. "Yes." "And she's trying to make it look like it's your fault." "Yes." "That's so messed up." Sammy's voice cracked with emotion. "How can she do this to you?" "To us?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm going to fight for our family." "Good," she said fiercely, "because Mom's not the only one who can play games." That weekend, Sammy put on a performance that would have impressed method actors. She was cold and distant with Taryn, answering questions in monosyllables and spending most of her time with me. When Taryn tried to engage her in conversations about my supposed suspicious behavior, Sammy shut her down completely. "I don't want to talk about Dad behind his back," she said. "That's not the kind of person I want to be." The message was clear. Taryn was losing her daughter as well as her husband. But the real turning point came when I finally decided to use the recording of my conversation with Renee. I didn't broadcast it publicly. That would have been too crude. Instead, I shared it with exactly 3 people: James Morrison, my lawyer; Lisa Chen, my private investigator; and Patricia Voss, Elliot's second ex-wife. Patricia was a revelation. A sharp, bitter woman who'd been destroyed by Elliot's manipulations but had rebuilt her life through sheer force of will. When I contacted her and explained the situation, she was eager to help. "He did the same thing to me," she said during our phone conversation. "Convinced me that my husband was neglecting me, that I deserved better. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd isolated me from all my friends and drained my bank accounts. I have evidence of what he's doing to my wife," I said. "Would you be willing to corroborate his pattern of behavior?" "I'd be delighted to." Patricia provided me with documentation of Elliot's previous schemes: court records, financial statements, testimony from other victims. The man was essentially a professional homewrecker, moving from town to town, targeting wealthy married women and destroying their lives for profit. Armed with this information, I made an appointment to see Taryn's boss, Margaret Hoffman, the senior partner at the PR firm. Margaret was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd built her business on discretion and reputation management. When I walked into her office with a folder full of evidence about her star consultant's extracurricular activities, she listened with the focused attention of someone calculating potential damage to her firm. "This is very concerning, Griffin," she said after reviewing the materials. "If even half of this is true, Elliot represents a significant liability to our company." "I thought you should know," I said, "especially given how closely he's been working with Taryn." "Yes, I've noticed their collaboration has been quite intensive lately." The meeting lasted an hour. By the end of it, Margaret had a complete picture of the situation, not just Elliot's predatory history, but Taryn's complicity in the current scheme. "I'll need to conduct a thorough investigation," she said finally. "In the meantime, I think it would be best if both Elliot and Taryn were placed on administrative leave. I appreciate your professionalism in handling this matter. Griffin, I want you to know that this firm has always valued integrity above all else. If your wife has been involved in activities that reflect poorly on our reputation, there will be consequences." I left Margaret's office feeling lighter than I had in months. The trap was set, the pieces were in motion, and my wife's carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. But I wasn't done yet. The final act was still to come, and it was going to be spectacular. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my office. Margaret Hoffman's voice was crisp and businesslike, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. "Griffin, I wanted to update you on our investigation. We've completed our review of Elliot's activities, and the results are illuminating." "I'm listening." "It appears that Mr. Voss has been using company resources to conduct personal business, including booking hotel rooms and restaurant reservations for his extracurricular activities. We've also discovered some irregularities in his expense reports that suggest potential fraud. And Taryn, your wife's involvement is more complicated. While we haven't found evidence of financial misconduct on her part, her judgment regarding professional boundaries has been questionable. We'll be conducting a formal review of her client relationships and recent project decisions." "What does that mean, practically speaking?" "Elliot's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. Taryn will remain on administrative leave pending the completion of our review, but I suspect she'll want to consider other career options." I thanked Margaret and hung up, feeling a grim satisfaction. Phase 1 of the endgame was complete. Phase 2 began that evening when Taryn came home in a rage. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed, throwing her purse across the kitchen so hard it knocked over a vase of flowers. "Going to Margaret behind my back, spreading lies about Elliot, sabotaging my career." "I didn't spread any lies," I said calmly, not looking up from the newspaper I was reading. "I simply shared some factual information about your colleague's background." "You destroyed my life." "No, Taryn, you did that all by yourself." She stared at me, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" I folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside. "I'm talking about your affair with Elliot Voss. I'm talking about your plan to frame me for infidelity to justify your divorce. I'm talking about the months you've spent humiliating me in front of our friends while you plotted to destroy my reputation. I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything, Taryn." I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I'd left a manila folder. Text messages, hotel receipts, photos, witness statements, bank records showing how Elliot's been using you to fund his lifestyle, audio recordings of Renee explaining your arrangement to me. Her face went white. "You recorded Renee?" "I recorded everything. Did you really think I was stupid enough to let you destroy me without fighting back?" "Griffin, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like. You and your boyfriend decided I was an easy mark, the boring husband who'd back down while you took half of everything I'd worked for. The only problem is, you underestimated me." I opened the folder and pulled out a photograph, Taryn and Elliot kissing in the parking lot of the Riverside Motel, taken by Lisa Chen's telephoto lens. "Recognize this?" Taryn sank into a chair, her face crumbling. "How long have you known?" "Months. I've been watching you, documenting everything, building a case that will ensure you get exactly what you deserve in our divorce." "Our divorce? Did you think we were going to stay married after this? Taryn, you've spent the better part of a year trying to destroy me. You've humiliated me in public, turned our friends against me, and attempted to manipulate our daughter into believing I was the problem. Did you really think there was a way back from that?" She started crying then, not the elegant tears of a woman in a movie, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose world was collapsing. "I never meant for it to go this far," she gasped. "It started as just, I don't know, excitement, something different. But then Elliot said we could be together if you were out of the picture, and Renee had all these ideas about how to make it happen. So you decided to destroy me." "No, I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to matter to someone." "You mattered to me for 23 years. Apparently, that wasn't enough." She looked up at me with mascara streaking down her cheeks. "What happens now?" "Now you get to experience the consequences of your choices," Margaret's already fired Elliot and suspended you. I've filed for divorce, and my lawyer has all the evidence he needs to ensure you won't be getting the generous settlement you were probably planning on. Griffin, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. Counseling? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Taryn, you tried to frame me for adultery. You enlisted our daughter as a spy. You turned our friends into unwitting accomplices in your scheme. There's no coming back from that. But I love you. No, you don't. You love the lifestyle I provided. You love the house and the cars and the country club membership. But you don't love me, because if you did, you never could have done what you've done. I closed the folder and picked up my keys from the counter. Where are you going? To my lawyer's office. We have a lot of paperwork to finalize. Griffin, wait. What about Sammy? What are we going to tell her? We're not going to tell her anything. I already have. She knows exactly what kind of person her mother really is. That was perhaps the cruelest blow of all, and I could see it land like a physical punch. Taryn's relationship with our daughter had always been complicated, but it was important to her. Knowing that Sammy had chosen sides and hadn't chosen her was devastating. I left her there in the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of her schemes, and drove to James Morrison's office to finalize the divorce papers. But the story wasn't over yet. There was still one more scene to play out. The Riverside Country Club's spring gala was 3 days later, and despite everything that had happened, I decided to attend. Not because I wanted to socialize, but because I wanted to see the aftermath of my wife's destruction play out in public. The reaction was everything I could have hoped for. Word of Taryn's affair and Elliot's firing had spread through our social circle like wildfire. When I walked into the ballroom, conversation stopped. People stared. Whispers followed in my wake, but the whispers weren't directed at me. I heard he was using her to pay for hotel rooms. Completely humiliated Griffin in front of everyone. Always thought there was something off about her lately. I made my way to the bar and ordered a whiskey, nodding politely to acquaintances who approached with carefully neutral expressions. Griffin, Jennifer Walsh appeared at my elbow, her face full of sympathy. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I said honestly. It's been a difficult few months, but I'm glad the truth is finally out. We all feel terrible about what happened. If we'd known what Taryn was doing, you couldn't have known. She was very good at hiding it. Still, we should have been better friends to you. The way she talked to you at dinner that night. We should have said something. You're saying something now. That's what matters. More people approached throughout the evening, colleagues, neighbors, acquaintances who wanted to express their support or share their own suspicions about Taryn's behavior. It was a strange kind of vindication, seeing how quickly the social tide had turned. But the real satisfaction came when I spotted Elliot across the room. He was standing alone near the silent auction tables, looking like a man who'd lost everything. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders and darting eyes of someone who knew he was unwelcome but couldn't quite bring himself to leave. I walked over to him with my drink in hand. Elliot, surprised to see you here. He turned and I could see the defeat in his face. Griffin, I wanted to apologize. Apologize? For what happened with Taryn. It got out of hand. I never meant for things to go so far. You never meant to get caught, you mean? He flinched. I know you have every right to hate me. Hate you? I considered this. No, I don't think I hate you. Hatred requires a level of respect that I simply don't have for you. You're a predator who targets vulnerable women and destroys families for profit. Hating you would be like hating a snake for being venomous. It's just what you are. Taryn wasn't vulnerable. She knew exactly what she was doing. Did she? Or did you convince her that her marriage was failing and you were her salvation? Same playbook you used on Patricia and your first wife, and who knows how many others. His face went pale. You talked to Patricia? I talked to everyone, Elliot. Your ex-wives, your former colleagues, the women you've seduced and abandoned over the years. You have quite the reputation. What do you want from me? Nothing. You've already given me everything I needed: evidence of your pattern of behavior, documentation of your schemes, and the satisfaction of watching you destroy yourself. I finished my whiskey and set the empty glass on a nearby table. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Elliot. I understand you'll be looking for a new job soon. Might I suggest a different town? Your reputation here is somewhat tarnished. I left him standing there and made my way toward the exit. The evening had been everything I'd hoped for: public vindication, social rehabilitation, and the sweet taste of revenge served at exactly the right temperature. But as I reached the door, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Griffin, wait!" I turned to see Renee Collins approaching, her face flushed with wine and desperation. "Renee, I'm surprised you're speaking to me." I need to explain about that conversation we had. I was just trying to help. Help who? Me or Taryn and Elliot? It's complicated. Taryn was my friend, and she was so unhappy. Unhappy enough to destroy her marriage and frame her husband for adultery? She wasn't thinking clearly. Elliot had her completely manipulated. I was trying to find a way to minimize the damage. By encouraging me to accept her affair? By trying to prevent a messy divorce that would hurt everyone, especially Sammy. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse. What I saw instead was calculation. She was still trying to manage the narrative, still trying to find an angle that would minimize her complicity in the scheme. "Renee, do you know what I've learned through all of this?" "What?" "That the most dangerous people aren't the ones who stab you in the front. They're the ones who smile to your face while they're sharpening the knife for your back. You orchestrated this entire thing, didn't you? You introduced Taryn to Elliot, you encouraged their affair, you coached her on how to build a case against me, and when it all started falling apart, you tried to manipulate me into accepting it. That's not... I would never... Save it. I have recordings, remember? I know exactly what you did and why you did it. The question is, was it worth it? Was destroying my marriage worth whatever you thought you'd gain?" She stared at me, and I could see the moment when she realized her game was over. "You're going to destroy me too, aren't you?" "No, Renee. I'm not going to destroy you. You're going to destroy yourself, just like Taryn and Elliot did. Because that's what happens to people who build their lives on lies and manipulation. Eventually, the foundation crumbles." I walked out of the country club into the cool spring air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation as the town's elite dissected the evening's drama and speculated about what would happen next. But I already knew what would happen next. Taryn would fight the divorce, but she'd lose. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and Massachusetts law didn't look favorably on adultery, especially when it involved financial misconduct and attempts to defraud a spouse. Elliot would leave town, probably to find another wealthy woman in another community to target. But his reputation would follow him now, thanks to the network of his ex-wives and victims who were finally talking to each other. Renee would try to rebuild her social standing, but the recordings of our conversation would make that difficult. Trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to repair. And me? I would start over. At 41, with my assets intact, my reputation restored, and my daughter's respect, I had everything I needed to build a new life. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago. Naive, trusting, willing to believe that his wife's cruelty was just a phase she was going through. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who tried to play games with his life. It wasn't the ending I'd planned when I married Taryn 23 years ago, but it was the ending she'd chosen when she decided to betray everything we'd built together, and in the end, justice served cold was still justice. When you play with fire, don't be surprised if you burn the whole house down.